everyone, this is Brock's Gags. I'm going to make this video where we show how to create a part inside of SolidWorks. And so we're going to start with a very simple part here. I've got a drawing of it on the screen at this point, and it's a very simple, it's only got a handful of features, but at least get us started as far as how I can go from a 2D drawing and actually create the 3D model itself here. So before we get into SolidWorks, let's talk a little bit about this drawing. This drawing is using orthographic projection, and that's what these three views here are. Basically, you're looking at it from what we'll call the front view in this region right here, and then if I looked from the top down, I would see this right here, and then if I looked from the right side, toward the left, if you will, where the part's in the middle, it'd be looking at right here. And we'll get into more detail as far as what all the different line types are, so that you're able to read these things much more naturally than if this is the first time you've ever seen one of these drawings. And so what this model consists of, and you can kind of tell a little easier in the isometric view if you're not used to the kind of dashed lines representing hidden lines and the center lines and everything there, is basically we've got a circular solid piece at the bottom, and then we've got a almost like a disc, and then another taller circular boss there, that's this piece here, and then we've got this hole that's been drilled all the way through the part, as you can see here, and then we've got these rounds here. And so one of the things we talked about is SolidWorks, and talked about it being parametric, and it's feature based as well. And so one of the things we start doing is we look at this part and start breaking it down into individual features. And so the first feature I see is, hey, I've got this kind of base feature right here. It's like a circular disc component, and then it's like on top of that circular disc I have this other circular piece as well, except for it's much taller, right? I can use these dimensions here to say, well, from this surface here to this top surface it's about 2 inches. And then I've got another feature, I guess it'd be feature number 3. I've got this hole that's drilled all the way through the part. And then I'm going to combine these fillets into the 4th feature. This is the fillet here and the round here. Usually fillets are on an inside corner, rounds are more on the outside corner, just in terms of nomenclature there. And so that's what we're seeing. I've got a material here, let's say it's made out of plain carbon steel. And another thing worth noting is this little blue tick mark here. That's the origin, as I've got pointed out in the isometric view. This is something you'll want to start slowly figuring out, okay, where's the origin at in the part, and how do I make sure that when I get done with my model it's at the same spot in the drawing, just because that'll be one of the things that I evaluate your work on, is if I specify an origin and an orientation, can your model match that? One of the reasons we do that is because the certified SolidWorks exams that we've talked about used that type of definition for the geometry in order to assist them in evaluating your models. So with that being said, I've got SolidWorks open here in the background, and we'll go ahead and create the part. And so I'm going to go up to File area and kind of go New here, and I've got a bunch of different templates, but I want this part template right here. And so this should open up a default part template. As you get to work for a company, they'll probably already have their templates set up there. So any sort of configuration steps that they've already taken will already be applied for you, most likely. And so one of the things you want to start off with at the very beginning of your modeling is figuring out what the units are. And so if I look at this part, one of the kind of indicators is that I've got decimal numbers like 0.375, 0.125 for the rounds. That's 3/8 is 0.375 there. That's a fairly good indicator. It's not always guaranteed, but it's probably going to be in inches. And so you'll want to consult the title block if you find one. And so like right here, it's saying that the dimensions are in inches there. And so I want to make sure that my part reflects that as well. And so if I switch back over to SolidWorks, one way you can see it is down here in the very bottom right. I'll see where it says custom, and I can actually click that, and you can see I've got about a bunch of different unit systems here. And so MKS, where the length measurement is meters, the mass measurement is kilograms, and the time measurement is second. CGS, MMGS, and what we're interested in here at this case is IPS, inch, pound, second. So I'll click it, and so now all my length units will be measured with inches. So we talked about this thing in features, and one of the first feature that I mentioned was this kind of circular disc here at the bottom. And so let's work on that. And so before we actually start to model, let's get some dimensions in mind here. It looks like the diameter from the top view, that outer diameter is 2.5 inches. And if I look down here, the thickness is 0.375 inches. And so that'll be good enough to get started. And also I'm just thinking of the origin, it's right in the middle. And also just to think about the isometric view. I want it to look like this in the isometric view. So that's going to be important when I pick this first plane that I start to model on. And so what I mean model, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start by just drawing a circular sketch, and then we'll create this disc by basically taking that circular sketch, we'll draw that on a plane, and then we'll pull that circle perpendicular to the plane and be enveloping some volume there, and basically we'll then put a material in that volume. And so what I got to work with at this point, if I look at my tree, is I have some planes here. And I'll just click here and hold shift down and click this one and hit the eyeball to show them. And so what I've just exposed in SolidWorks are the front, the top, and the right planes. And so any SolidWorks part file you create will automatically come with these three planes. And what these are doing is defining the coordinate system around you. And you say, okay, well, I don't see an origin. Well, it's hidden right now, but the origin is right there at the intersection of those three planes. And so the idea is when I put this in isometric view, which by the way, I can go to these named views right here. And so I've got a little icon here. These boxes that you're seeing right here that kind of make this sideways cross are the 6 views of the orthographic projection. And then this guy here gives you some other named views, and so this is the isometric view. So basically when I put the drawing in this view itself, I want to be able to see this component look something similar to this. So in order to achieve that, and if I'm going to start with this bottom feature, what I need to do is make that sketch on this plane right here, the front plane. And so there's a few different ways to create a sketch. One way I can just click the plane and I can click that icon right here. And another way is I can come up here. You can see my command manager or my ribbon here. It's got a bunch of different ribbons. Some of them we don't really need, but it does have a sketch ribbon. So I'll click sketch. I'll click create a new two-dimensional sketch. You do have to be careful because there are 2D and 3D sketches inside of SolidWorks. So I'll create a 2D sketch just by clicking right here. And what it's asking, you'll see here on the left-hand side, SolidWorks does a pretty good job of prompting you to follow the next action. So select a plane on which you create a sketch or the sketch for the entity. And so I'm going to click that top plane. You can see what happened. That plane was rotated so that it's now perpendicular to the screen, so I'm looking straight on at it. And at this point I'm going to go ahead and click the front plane, click the right plane, holding shift down while I do it, and hide those planes. So now I'm in a sketching environment. You can see I'm in the bottom right editing sketch 1. SolidWorks just creates sketches one after the other, sketch 1, sketch 2, sketch 3. It kind of automatically names them for you there. And we talked about creating a circle here centered at the origin for our first sketch. And so if you look at the sketch bar, I've got a lot of different geometric construction tools. I can create lines, circles. There's different ways to create circles here, rectangles, and different ways to create rectangles, so on and so forth. But I want to create this center point circle, so I'm just going to left click on it. And I can see my icon changes to a little pencil here. And it's also giving me hints here on the left hand side. My first click will be the center, and my second click is going to be a point on the circle. So that's going to define an initial radius for me. So I will hover over the origin. You can see that orange dot kind of locked to the origin, so I'll left click once. And then as I move my mouse away, you can see that I'm starting to draw a circle. And if I move the mouse close to the origin, it's a small radius, and I move the mouse farther, it gets the larger radius. So one of the things we talked about was kind of shape before size idea of SolidWorks. I can just click anywhere here. I just left clicked once, and it created that circle. It's still selected right now, so I'm going to hit escape from the keyboard. And so now I've got a circle on my top plane. This little green guy right here, that is a geometric relation. We'll talk about those a little bit more in the future. But basically this guy is in particular saying the center of that circle is coincident or right on top of the origin itself here. And so that's constraining the location of the circle, but I also need to tell it the size of the circle. At this point, we would say that this sketch is underdefined in terms of SolidWorks lingo. You can see that in the bottom right here, which basically says that I, as the designer, have not told SolidWorks enough information to fully describe the geometry that I'm seeing in the sketch. In this case, it's a simple circle. And you think about that a little bit, well, I've told it the center of the circle, but I haven't told it the size yet. I haven't told it a radius or a diameter of the circle. And so to do that, I can come up here and go to a smart dimension. But before I go that, I'm going to just refresh my memory. Okay, that was a 2.5 inch diameter circle. So I'm going to go to smart dimension here. Now you can see the icon changed to the smart dimension. I'll left click on the perimeter of the circle, the circumference. I can start dragging off, and you can see I've got a dimension here starting to form. And I'll just left click here in space just to set the location of the dimension. You can change that afterwards, and it's saying, okay, I'm ready to modify the dimension. This dimension's name is D1 at Sketch 1. It stands for Dimension 1 at Sketch 1, or the first dimension inside of Sketch 1, and it's 2.5 inches. And so I can just come in here, enter it's 2.43. We want it to be 2.5. I can enter 2.5. It already knows the default units are inches, and I can just hit enter on the keyboard, and now that sets the diameter of that circle to 2.5. If you haven't seen it before, that circle here with the diagonal line going through it, that stands for a diameter. And so now that we got that in place, you can see everything went to black. And so that means that it's fully defined. You can see down here in the bottom that the sketch reflects that it's fully defined. And so one of the things that you'll want to work toward as you model sketches, you want to always leave them fully defined. That means there's nothing that's left up to the software, so to speak. It's nothing you haven't fully described the shape to the software. And so with that being done, we're ready to exit the sketch. So I'll go ahead and click Exit Sketch here on the top left. And so we talked about SolidWorks, this feature tree developing. So now we've got our first feature, and it's the sketch. You can see if I hover over it, you can see it references the origin as well as the top plane. And so with it selected, now notice I've got it still selected. I'm going to go straight into the Features tab, and I'm going to go to a Boss Extrude. And so you can kind of see the animation there, where you can see I'm taking a sketch and I'm pulling perpendicular to the sketch, and I'm creating this volume that then's going to be filled with material, which is exactly what we want here. So I just clicked on it. Now I've got a nice preview here in yellow. If you want, you can actually grab this arrow and pull it up and pull it down, and it'll actually resize the height of this cylinder we're developing. And the height's right here. And we'll talk about all these other different options in the future. So we go back to our drawing and say, well, what is that initial height? Well, if I look at the front view here, that initial height is 0.375, 3/8 of an inch. And so to define that, we just come back to SolidWorks. It's right now 0.5, so I can put 0.375 in there. Hit enter, and then I can hit enter from the keyboard or hit this green check mark. Green check mark is basically OK or accept in SolidWorks. And there we go. Now we've created our first solid body feature inside of SolidWorks. And so I'll just hit F to fit it to the screen. And so now it looks like I'm in good shape. I've got definitely a lot of work to do, but I can still see how I'm going in the right direction. Another way to check right now is if I go to the isometric view. So here and here, you can see I've got this in the right orientation, right? It's not kind of looking like this or at some weird angle, but it's nice and kind of square to the world, if you will, just like my goal here on the drawing. So we've got our first feature done. So now we're just going to replicate that and do it again, except for this time we're going to draw a slightly smaller circle. You can see here the diameter is 1.5 for the outer diameter of this circular boss that sits on top of that disc that we just made. And its height was 2 inches here, or 2.375 from the base. And so one way to do this, again, there's a lot of times there's multiple ways to get to the end geometry, is I can create another sketch. And in this time, I'm going to do a slightly different way. Now that I've got geometry in place and a flat planar surface right here, I'm going to start my sketch on this face instead of on one of these default datum planes. And so one way to do that, it's a little bit quicker, is just left click on the face. You can see this little quick access box pop up, and I can click this icon right here to create a new sketch on that face. So I'll click it. And now it's a little subtle, but I'm now in a sketching environment again. You can always come down here and it'll say editing sketch, whatever number it is. At this point, it didn't rotate it for us, and so one thing I can do is I can come to these view orientation, and I can say make the view normal to, in this case, normal to the plane that I'm sketching in, and it'll rotate the model so that I'm looking straight down on it. And so this time again, we're going to create a circle. It's going to have a diameter of 1.5, and it's going to have its center centered on the origin. So I'll go here. Again, I can come up here to the top, go circle. First clicks right on the center, so I'll put it right on the origin, and then I'll drag off, pick a point for the circle's edge, defining the radius, and then I'll go ahead and put another smart dimension in. Click once on the circumference of the circle, click out here in space. It's ready for me to put in a dimension. I believe it was 1.5. So I'll just enter that from the keyboard and hit enter. And so you can see how quickly it is to create these very simple sketches. And now again, I'm at a fully defined sketch. So I'll hit escape a few times just to make sure I've got everything cleared out. And now I want to create another boss extrude from this. So same as last time, I can exit the sketch. And now the sketch is still selected. So I can come up to boss extrude. And so it's a little hard to see, so I'll rotate the model. I'm just holding the middle mouse down as I move the mouse to rotate it. Scrolling in and out is zooming. And then I believe, holding control and holding middle mouse down will allow you to pan inside of the three-dimensional space. So it's ready for me to put a numeric value in here for the height of this little cylinder that I'm developing. And so if I look at this, I could make a dimension such that it's referencing the bottom surface, but instead we model it on this surface, so I got to do a little bit of subtraction. 2.375 minus the 0.375 gets us 2 inches. So that relative height is 2 inches. So I'll come back to SolidWorks, type in 2.00 here. You can see the preview change. That all looks good, and I'll hit enter again. Now I'm going to put in an isometric view here. I'm going to use a shortcut by holding control down and hitting 7 from the keyboard, and that'll dump me into an isometric view, and you can see again how I'm starting to approach the isometric view of the drawing. So that's looking good. But what about this big hole in the middle, you might say? I've got this big hole. It goes all the way through the part, and I haven't done that. And the only tool I've shown you at this point doesn't remove material. It adds material to the part. And so just like there's a boss extrude where you draw a sketch and you pull it perpendicular to the sketch plane and you're basically defining a volume that's enclosed with material, you can use a cut extrude, which works the same way. You define a sketch on a plane, you pull it perpendicular to the plane, but this time the volume, you're going to remove material that's in the volume, and that's basically the job of this cut extrude. And so what we can do is define another sketch. In this case, let's just sketch on the very top face here. So I'll left click on that face, again wait for the quick access icon to show up and hit create a new sketch. Now you can see I'm in sketch 3, it'll also say editing sketch 3 here again. And again, just like last time, I'll use this normal to icon in order to get normal to it. And here we've got a circular hole. It goes all the way through the part, as you can see by these dashed lines here that run from the very top to the very bottom. And the diameter this time is 1.125. So you've probably guessed at this point. I'm going to use that same circle tool, have the center on the origin, and define a diameter of 1.125. So I'll go this one a little bit quicker since it's the third time we've seen it. I can go circle, center point circle, and defining the radius. Notice there's a 3-point circle where you pick 3 points on the circumference. But at this point I pick the center for 1. I click out here, that'll define the radius. Hit escape to stop the circle tool, and then go to the smart dimension tool, click the circle circumference, click out here, and now it's ready for me to define the diameter now of 1.125. Don't worry about the fact that it says 1.13 here. It's just a setting on side of the sketching environment that's rounding everything to 2 decimal places. But once again, I am now at a fully defined sketch, and so at this point I can exit the sketch. And now this time, as I rotate the model, instead of going to Boss Extrude to add material, I'm going to go to Cut Extrude because I want to remove the material. And so SolidWorks is showing the preview. It's already guessing fairly well that, hey, instead of going up, I need to go down because all the material is below that sketch plane. And so right now it's saying, hey, I'm going to go down, and the default is a blind, such as where I'm going to tell it a depth to move in this direction here. And it's already defaulting to 2 inches. But you're saying, well, I want to go all the way through the part. Well, one way to do that would be to actually hard enter a 2.375, but this kind of gets back to capturing the design intent of the model. So if we know for certainty this is always going to go through all the model, why don't we just tell the software to say, hey, always go all the way through the model when I do this cut extrude? And you can do that by changing this blind here to define the direction to through all. And so notice just by changing that, now I no longer have the ability to specify a dimension in here. And you can see the preview here is going all the way from the top surface to the bottom surface here. So it's just going to say, hey, I'm going to go to that top plane, that's where your sketch plane is, and I'm going to go all the way down until I've gone all the way through the model, which is exactly what we want. So we can hit the green check mark to accept it. And again, I'll hit Control-7 to preview it. And again, we're looking like we're in pretty good shape here. Yep, you can see that that hole goes all the way through the part. Okay, so the next step is these rounds or these fillets. You can see I've got these kind of rounded corners here and here from the right view, and on the front view as well. And right now my model doesn't show that. And so to do that, we can use the rounded fillet tool. The rounds are 1/8 of an inch, and I can apply it to this sharp edge right now that I have, and this sharp edge right here that I have right now, and it'll round them over. So this is a feature that we're going to use, but it doesn't require a sketch, right? All these features that I've used so far, it was a sketch and a feature, a sketch and a feature. You can actually blow these nodes out, and you can see, hey, inside of Boss Extrude 1 is sketch 1, Boss Extrude 2 is sketch 2, Cut Extrude 1 is sketch 3. This time I'm just going to go straight up to the fillet tool, and I don't have to make a sketch. So there's a few different ways you can make fillet. The easiest is this constant size fillet, which is what we were dealing with now. You can leave all these defaults for what we're doing, and the radius I'll have to enter and adjust. Instead of 0.1, I want it to be 0.125. And then what I can do is just click on these edges. You can see as I click on it, the preview is generating. And if I click on the edge right there, the blue edge is the ones I clicked on, the yellow geometry is the preview, and you can see that looks exactly like what I want to see as far as from the drawing. And so I'll hit the green check mark, and now I've added this round and this fillet here. Hit Control-7, and yes, that's looking very nice. Looks very similar to this right here in the isometric view. There's one last thing I can think of that I haven't done at this point, and that's to define the material. I want this to be plain carbon steel. Right now it just doesn't know the material, right? As you can see in the tree structure here, it says material not specified, but I can right click on it. Plain carbon steel is one of our quick access, quick selection items here, so I'll just click plain carbon steel. You can see the appearance changed a little bit, and now I've got this part as plain carbon steel. And so I think we've reached the end at this point. Our drawing looks very close. And we can go evaluate. This one thing that we can do from the model is now that we've applied a material, we can get a mass properties of it. And you can see the mass of this is 0.85 pounds, which I believe is a decent way for us to check because our drawing is saying the weight is 0.85 pounds as well here. And there you have it. We've modeled a very simple part inside of SolidWorks. We've got, it looks like 4 features in the tree structure there, a couple boss extrudes, a cut extrude, and a fillet. So I hope this video has been helpful for you, and thank you for watching.